Have you heard about this personal and professional podcast?
Coaching in Session
with your host, Michael Rearden.
When is the last time you gave yourself a bit of confidence, or you gave yourself the idea to have courage to put yourself out there? In our world today, courage and confidence are almost two peas in the pod, but yet, when we look at which comes first, the chicken or the egg, courage comes first, confidence comes after. For example, when you are maybe trying to court someone and you are looking for a relationship and you say, you know what, I'm going to walk up to this person, right? You have to have the courage to get to that point. Now, when you get to that point and you're talking to that person, be confident, even understanding that the outcome might not be what you would like. Because the outcome for most people in that situation or that scenario, they want the person to say, my goodness, I'm so happy you spoke to me. I was looking at you. You are just my type. Let's go on a date. Let's get married. Let's start a family. Let's live happily ever after. Now, if we can give ourselves the happy ending all the time in our mind, right? More people would probably be courageous. They would not need so much of say, I'm not feeling confident, because they know the outcome is going to be something that they are going to enjoy. Very similar to procrastination. They think, I don't want to do something because this is not fun. This is not enjoyable to me or for me. So they will say, I'm going to procrastinate, even though they could do it, right? Because most people, when they're procrastinating on things, it doesn't mean that they have the inability to do the thing. It's that the fear is not great enough. So we can have courage in many different aspects to courage and confidence. So that means we could have the courage to not procrastinate, to not allow our fears to eventually get so great or so big that it drives us to take action. It's very similar to trauma. I'm going to wait for this traumatic experience so I can say, you know what? I think it'll be an appropriate time for me to take action. And most people, they wait. They wait until things are perfect. They wait until they feel confident. But you have to do it when you're not confident. You have to have the courage. And today we are going to be looking at my most recent blog, Courage versus Confidence, understanding the difference, and of course, their roles and how we can use them, leverage them, and then manipulate them to our benefit. Now, all of this is to be said that courage is the essential part. And I was like, let me do some research on courage. What I have found is that courage is the ability to take action despite the fear. That even if fear is present, I'm still going to do it. I'm going to start the business. I'm going to invest my money. I'm going to start the relationship. I'm going to do things that I might not have done otherwise. There's an idea of yes. When we give ourselves this idea of yes is a positive word. It's a positive term. It grants access to many things, not only in the world, but within our mind also. So what this essentially means is if I say yes to something, I'm giving an entryway for something to come my way, versus if I say no, I block it. I'm building a brick wall. I'm building a fortress to say, you know what? Whatever is this, I don't want it. Now, of course, we have to have boundaries. We have to have limits. But for when we're looking at personal development, we should be looking at what can we be courageous for and toward, and let's start to do that more. Because yes, we can say no to the friends, we can say no to the drugs, we can say no to the things that are bringing us away from our goal, our dreams. You might think that, it's easy to get rid of the things that are, the obstacles. But let me tell you, it's actually very difficult, because it's not the friends. It's not the bosses. It's not the careers. It's not the low income. It's you. You are the problem. You have not trusted yourself in I don't know how many years. And maybe you have trusted yourself. Maybe you are a courageous person. And this is good, right? We can move on to the next step, the confidence part. But if we do not have the courage part, we need to start to build that. how do we build the courage part? Well, courage part is literally, like I said, standing up and getting the job done, even when you're afraid. Because if you would like to get things done, you have to do it. And I remember when I was in third grade, my father, he would give us, some money every week. It wasn't much. It'd be $5, maybe $20 most. What we did with the money was up to us. He didn't really tell us to go invest the money. He didn't tell us to not buy things with the money. He just gave us the money. Where he kind of did it in a weird way where he gave my brother, I think, the most money because he was the oldest, and me the next, and then my sister the least amount because she doesn't need all that money, basically, is what I guess he thought. One of the things he instilled inside of me or within me is to handle my business. And when I remember one day when I got that $20, my brother was already off into high school and my sister and I were still in elementary school. And we didn't have any food that morning. So we woke up getting ready for school, and I realized that there was no lunch for my sister or myself. My brother, he had lunch at the high school. He ate in the cafeteria, but we didn't have a cafeteria at my school. It was, we had a cafeteria, but you had to get the hot lunch plan, and we couldn't afford the hot lunch plan. And of course, we can do the low income stuff, and sometimes we did, but my mom sometimes forgot to do it. So we would have to figure out how we would get food for ourselves. So they would go to the store and they would buy Wonder Bread. And I don't even know Wonder Bread is still around, but we would buy Wonder Bread. We would buy about a pound of ham and a pound of cheese, and we would put it on bread, maybe a little bit of mayo. We didn't use mustard. And that was our lunch. Maybe we had a little juicy, like the little water juices that were terrible for you, artificial food coloring and dye and bad sugars for you. And that's, that was our food. So it was a, ham and cheese sandwich with a little juicy. And sometimes if we were lucky, we had some chips. Well, I said, with this $20, I'm going to use this $20 and I'm going to buy stuff. I'm going to buy some candy, and maybe I'll buy a video game or something. I'm thinking all the things that I could buy for myself. Well, going back to what I was saying, we didn't have any food that morning. And what my father said early on, he said, to handle my business, and that was resonating inside of me. So I went to the corner store down the street. They make sandwiches and stuff, but they have a little bit more fancy sandwiches on a hard roll, not on Wonder Bread. Ham and cheese, lettuce, tomato. They put some salt and pepper and some vinegar and stuff on it. So it's a pretty good sandwich, right? Of course, I bought some chips and I got a juice, but it wasn't one of the cheap juices. I think it was more of a 50-cent juice. So it was a little bit bigger. I had got that for my sister and myself. And then I went back to the house and I said, okay, this is your lunch and this is my lunch. And we packed it and we went to school. I never asked for a recognition from my mom or my dad or my sister or whoever saying, hey, look at what I did. Look at me being a good brother or me being a good citizen or a good family member, at least, if you want to go with citizen, because I'm not helping the world yet. I'm just helping my family. It was more so for myself, where I knew I had to do it. I had to handle my business. There was not so much fear going through my mind. It was more so of a responsibility that was yearning within me, that was egging me on, saying, handle your business, you have to do this. And if we look at courage, that same feeling can be there. That same idea could be there. It might not be the same situation when you have to go get someone food and you might not know what you're going to do when the money's run dry or something. It was more so of the idea of, I'm doing this because I know it's going to lead to something better. Courage is doing something when you're not 100% certain, when you might be afraid, right? Because courage could be the presence of fear and you do it regardless. So people are courageous when they do something that someone else might say is, a fear of theirs. You go on stage, you're a single mom and you do it by yourself. Oh, you're so brave. You're so courageous, right? These words are powerful words, right? Because then we give the person some feeling that they are on the right path, that they are doing good things. And when you praise someone, typically confidence comes next. But the thing about confidence is it doesn't have to be associated with praise from anyone else. Because going back to the story of what I said with my situation with no food and having to go to the store and getting a sandwich and food for my sister and myself, it wasn't so much of I needed the world to appreciate what I did. And maybe, they noticed what I did, but I don't think they did. And I don't necessarily even mind that they didn't because I did it for me. I did it because I understood my responsibility, not only as a brother or as a son, but as a man in general, right? You handle your business. And most men today, they are going through it. They are going through the struggles. They are going through the challenges, and they have the fear and they have the doubt, but they lack the courage. Most men today are not confident. Most men will say, I'm not going to go talk to the girl at the bar because I'm going to get shot down. So most men don't even shoot their shot. So they will stay inside and they will go to OnlyFans or go on porn websites because they do not have the courage. They do not have the confidence. We need to build that up. So when we do the idea of confidence, or when we think about the idea of confidence, what does it represent? What does it give you? Because when you do something and you can do something, you become confident. But the thing about confidence is this eventually becomes a sense of homeostasis, meaning you become numb to it. Because if I ask you to walk to the fridge and get me a Coca-Cola or get me a water or get me something, you might say, sure thing, not a problem. But if you are confined in a wheelchair, if you are maybe, someone going and recovering from a stroke, or if you are someone who has gotten injured and is going through therapy, that task might be more difficult. So something that is so mundane to us, we think about the things that are out of our control versus the things that are in our control most of the time. Because we can get up, we can walk to the fridge, most of us, and we can get that drink. That's confidence. You can do it. But for the majority of people, they don't know that they can be successful. They don't know that, they can be happy. They don't know that they can, start something and finish it. So most people say, you know what, I'm not even going to instill this idea within inside of me. Well, confidence is doing something because you believe you can do it. When I started the company, Reven Concepts, I saw what was happening in the minds of so many people. Most people believed that they couldn't. Most people were living in their circumstance. Most people were living within their box, their confined comfort zone. Most people were living within their limits. And I started to say, well, you know what? There has to be a new mindset that we can instill inside people, inside the world, to make them feel confident. Well, it begins at a very early age, of course, because you can have parents who either build you up or break you down. A good example of a parent who has built someone up is Tom Brady. He had a mother and a father who built that man up. The man that we see today as Tom Brady, one of the greatest quarterbacks in the world, had the system, the foundation of nurturing parents. I heard a quote, I'm not sure if it's a quote or more so a saying, that when you yell at your child or when you hurt your child's feelings, and I'm using the words feelings loosely because you are not in control of their feelings, but when they're so young, they were relying on you for so many things like food and safety and shelter, the basic needs for a person to have a good strong mindset or a good mental attitude toward life. If they don't have that, then that's when negativity begins to arise within the mind and the body. Sometimes, even though you might be going through the adversity, if you can come out on the other end, you become stronger. We can look at Mike Tyson, for example, one of the best boxers or one of the greatest boxers in our lifetime. He did it because he grew up in an environment that made him tough. Imagine if we had to reinforce steel, and how we reinforced steel was we got marshmallows and we started throwing marshmallows at the steel. It wouldn't work. Steel requires folding and heavy hammering, because if we do not fold it, it won't become stronger. If we don't reinforce it, it won't become stronger. So we have to, in a sense, we have to reinforce ourselves. And if we don't have an environment that reinforces us, typically, whether it be positive or negative, we're not going to be strong. So you don't necessarily need a negative environment to be a great person. However, I will say negativity has a different power associated to it versus a positive environment. If you want to be a fighter, I say if you grew up in a very negative place and you had to be a fighter and a go-getter to say, hey, if I want to live, I have to fight, you would probably be a better fighter. However, if you grow up in, nice, luxury, things like that, you're not going to have that animosity, that fierceness. And I'm not saying that there's not going to be a one-off or an outlier. We can always look at the 1%ers in any given field, the outliers, right? But today we can say, you know what? I'm more focused on, let me build this person up. So the saying, a very roundabout way of putting it is, when you yell at your child or when you discipline your child, they don't stop loving you. They stop loving themselves. And eventually, they don't have the courage to do the things that you would like them to do, because you are going to yell at them. You're going to scream at them. You're going to be mom. You're going to be dad. And I understand. They bring home a F on the test and you're like, you're not dumb. You're not stupid. But that's what they believe they are. They start associating themselves with everyone else around them. Well, why am I getting bad grades and bad scores and everyone else is, excelling? I must be dumb. I must be stupid. I must be inadequate. So they don't develop courage to fail. They just fail because they don't even want to try. They fail because they don't want to put themselves forward, or they don't want to assert themselves, because if they assert themselves and they fail, they realize something about themselves even greater than if they didn't even try. John Jones, he's a UFC fighter, one of the greatest. He talks about him going out and drinking before a match, or, like one of his, title fights and things like that. And one of the things he said was very human. He says, one of the reasons I go out and I drink and I get so, pissed drunk, essentially, is because if I lose in that fight, at least I have an excuse to why I lost. It wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It wasn't that the opponent was better than me. It was because I went out and I went drinking, right? So he had an escape plan. But he still has the courage to go into the ring, right? He still has the skill, right? He's confident. But there is a factor inside within him that says, well, if I lost, at least I have something to give the excuse to, rather than putting the finger on me. Well, what if I said that I want you to have the courage to put the blame on yourself? Because courage is more than just walking into something and knowing that, hey, I'm a little bit nervous. I'm a little bit fearful. You go to public speaking, right? People don't want to do public speaking because they don't want to develop the courage to public speak. When I was a teacher early on, essentially I was like, I don't know if I want to go in front of these kids and what are they going to think about me? I mean, I got rid of that thought so quick because it wasn't helpful. It was not going to help me be a better teacher. So you know what I did? I was confident. I went in and I said, this is what we're going to do. And we did it. And when I was confident, when I believed that growth was possible, not only within the student, the class, but the whole entire school did better. In the district, the director at the time, a year later, he didn't really like me, but I understand why. He asked, what are you doing? These kids are doing so great. And I said, we've been getting some work done. We've been doing the work. Where if you don't do the work, you can't really be upset that you're not getting the results. Because most people will love to coast by in life, cruise by and say, you know what? I'm not going to go after the things. I'm going to build up my confidence little by little. But we have to dare greatly. And I'm sure there's many people who have read the book, like The Power to Dare or something along with the idea of daring or dare greatly. If you do not dare, the courage, the idea to dare, growth is going to be always there, but it's going to be minimal. So you might find yourself in a really nice spot, and maybe you feel like you hit a plateau. Maybe you feel as if things are stagnant. But I encourage you to find your way to do it when you're scared, to do it when you're afraid. Because when you're, having the stance to go through a circumstance that might be unfavorable, eventually you're going to say, you know what? I can become stronger because of this. And I'm not saying you do things and you fail and you say, well, I failed. Michael says to keep on failing. We need to have a plan. We need to have direct actions in order to get it. And it depends on what you're looking for, because if you're looking to have the courage to start a new career, or if you are trying to maybe have the courage to, stand up to someone who's in front of you, or to start a new journey that's full of fears and doubts and unfamiliarity because you might not have done it before, guess what? Do it, right? I'm not saying you need to be perfect, but you need to do it. And then you also need to give yourself the resources to make sure that you become successful eventually. It's not so much that you say that I'm being courageous and I'm failing and I'm failing and I'm failing. It's that you're failing and you're adjusting. You're failing and you're pivoting. You're failing and you are making progress. They say fail forward, not fail backwards. So when we fail, that failure becomes a stepping stone, not an anchor, not something that is a deterrent for us to not propel ourselves. And then confidence essentially is just literally, stepping out of our comfort zone, right? We start to give ourselves this idea of what confidence is. We give ourselves this idea of the person who is confident. And maybe you give yourself a suit of armor. Maybe you give yourself a bit of liquid courage. Maybe you say, you know what? I'm going to practice confidence. And what does that mean? Well, I'm going to look up, right? I'm looking and I'm walking with my head held high. And that's the first thing I want you to do to build confidence. We all know how to walk. I said early on, we can go to the fridge, we can get me some water, we can get me a soda. But can you do it with confidence? Can you do it with intention? Can you say, I'm doing this because I know I can? And then when you accomplish it, acknowledge that you accomplished it. And then give yourself another goal. You should always have goals that scare you. You should have goals that you are fearful that you might not be able to attain. But then you remain optimistic, and optimism is good, but you need action. Confidence in action put together is going to create a certainty within your mind. It might not be today, but it will be eventually. So I don't know when that confidence is finally going to break through. But if you keep on talking to girls, if you're a guy and you want a relationship, eventually you're going to get a girl. Same thing with the girls, the guys. You're going to find someone who loves you and cares for you. Maybe for a career, you find the right career for you. It's not always going to come at first try. Most people who try the first time, they don't succeed. And if you do, maybe it could be luck. Maybe it could be that you do have the skill, but the persistence and the confidence that you have and that you can exude, that's going to be the testament of who you are and who you are going to be able to become. Michael Jordan, again, he failed, essentially going to be on the basketball team in high school. And he says, well, I'm not going to let this stop me. And then, of course, goes into the NBA and his competitive nature, his confidence that he basically is there. Everyone knew, right? Don't mess with what he called himself, Black Jesus. So that, basically, if you doubt him, he's going to say, okay, game on, right? So just because you're doing good in the first quarter or second quarter, basically he would say you had a good game up till now. And then basically he just kind of comes in and he just says, okay, this is who I am. Confidence. He had the courage to try. He had the courage to shoot, because if you can't even shoot, you're not going to make a shot. I encourage everyone to check out this article, Courage versus Confidence, understanding how you can give yourself this idea to personal growth just by instilling this idea of courage and confidence within your days. And in the things that you do. And I encourage everyone, if you, again, are struggling with being courageous, if you are struggling with confidence, maybe you didn't have a strong foundation growing up. Maybe you didn't have loving parents. Maybe you didn't have the best teachers in school. To reach out to us here at Reven Concepts, this is what we do. We help reverse the limits that people are living within. We help to get and break people out of the boxes that they decide to remain in. Life is so much more abundant than what you have right now. The quote I want to leave you with today is, what lies behind you and what lies in front of you pales in comparison to what lies inside of you. And this quote is by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And if we can think about that quote and we break it down, what lies behind you and what lies in front of you? So essentially talking about your past and your future. Going into pales into comparison to what lies inside of you, the moment, the power that you have right now. You can make a choice today. You don't have to say, okay, I'm going to procrastinate. Okay, I'm going to do it later. You have the power. This is the most powerful power you have right now, the moment. Because the past already happened, the future is not happening yet. So we have the power right now. And if you can learn to leverage the power of the moment of right now, what lies inside of you is going to be something that the world is going to say, whoa, why were you hiding that so long? Just because no one is clapping for you, because no one is seeing what you're doing or appreciating what you do every single day, it doesn't mean that people are not watching. Because it doesn't necessarily matter about your success when everyone is clapping for you. The success didn't happen when you were on stage and everyone loves and cheers for you. Your success happens when no one else is watching. It was just you and yourself. Your limits, your fears, your doubts, your uncertainties, but you decided to give yourself the courage to push through. That becomes confidence.